All right, we're back, and we got a trio of guests joining us right now. The director of Louisiana Good Life, Jane Batty, is with us, the director of international sales for visitsavannah.com. Mindy Shea is with us, and the owner of Shannon Scott Tours and Events, shannonscotttours.com. Shannon Scott is with us here on the Ringside Politics program. And folks, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Jane, why don't you kick us off, if you could, and tell our listeners a little bit about what has been going on, this lawsuit that has been going on between the Archdiocese and the Witches Brew Tour Company.
Okay. Well, this is a lawsuit. The Witches Brew Tours brought the Archdiocese into a lawsuit about access to St. Louis No. 1 cemetery. There are oral arguments that have started or will be starting soon, and then the case will be appealed in November in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. It's simple. In Louisiana, cemeteries are public property, and that is a very complex subject. It's not just a family plot, it's public property. Most people don't know this. It's the Archdiocese. Well, if the Archdiocese is allowed to restrict access, then all cemeteries will follow suit. So already cemeteries are becoming exclusive. Access is being denied right now, and one of the cemeteries downtown is already doing that. None of the cemeteries have the right to exclude. If one breaks the law, all will break the law. And the laws are watched over by the state cemetery board, which controls cemeteries in Louisiana. It's composed of owners of cemeteries for the most part. So owners of cemeteries regulate themselves. So cemeteries want to expand their rights, which means that plot owners' rights will be reduced or controlled eventually. The law is not going to enforce the laws on the books. The new appeal in the case is based on bogus allegations also. So all of that will be addressed in November. This lawsuit is clearly antitrust, clearly.
Let me get Shannon Scott in on this. And
Sure.
Shannon, what do you make of this dispute?
Well, wow. Granted, I've worked in cemeteries and around them for a long time and at every level from, having dug graves to, being involved with preservation and also their education. So I really feel they're very important to the overall public. I'll just say that. And I think, I hate that something like that has gone to a lawsuit level, obviously. I like that old-fashioned notion of just working it out between people, but there are a lot of competing interests when it comes to cemeteries, so I totally get it. But at the end of the day, I feel like their value, their inherent survival, really comes down to people being in and around them, learning about them, and that's like a freedom idea. Everyone should sort of have access. I mean, understandably, there's a respect element and managerial things like that, but I really feel like the value is in visitorship, or some call that tourism. But I think they're really there for everybody, and just locking them up
is not the answer. And then Shannon, isn't this?
So that's my take on it.
Isn't this one of the many attractions that draw people to New Orleans?
It sure is, and if any city in the United States or the world has a reputation, of great cemeteries and that invitation idea, it is New Orleans. There's no question about that. I mean, I'm obviously to some extent biased to Savannah, but I absolutely love New Orleans and love their cemeteries, and I just think there should be a freedom idea there that will ultimately benefit them. I mean, as I tell people, show me a cemetery without visitorship or without tourism, and I'll show you a pretty rundown cemetery, which isn't to say they don't have their problems from all kinds of environmental impact or whatever, but in general, the healthiest thing you can do is have people in them, the living.
And speaking of Savannah, let me bring on the Director of International Sales at VisitSavannah.com, Mindy
Hi.
Shea. And
Yes.
Mindy, do you have these kind of issues going on in Savannah where you have conflict about different attractions for visitors and we're closing off cemeteries to certain types of visitors?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do have restricted cemetery hours here in the city, and that can be frustrating because there are people that would like to have that access, before and after those normally set times by the city. But I think it also kind of addresses a larger issue, if you will, and this has kind of been a buzzword in the industry for some time now, is quote unquote over tourism. Where do you draw that line? Savannah's a city of 150,000 year-round residents, but we get over 14 million visitors a year. And
Wow.
as you can imagine, that has quite a strong impact on our resources and on our historic sites and attractions, and certainly that includes the cemeteries. But it's trying to strike that balance between the thriving hospitality industry that the tourism supports, which also does, presumably funnel back around to help keep some of these treasured historic sites running and in good shape. But it also, there is pushback from residents who live in this historic district and those who want to see, are concerned about the amount of wear and tear that type of tourism takes on certain sites.
And what do you think of this dispute here in New Orleans? You think it's harmful to our image, our industry?
Yeah, I mean, anytime, you see this back and forth, but to be honest, these types of things happen in a lot of cities. Any city that's kind of struggling with that balance, it certainly doesn't help, but is it going to stop the average tourist from, if they read an article or hear something on the radio, is it going to stop them from coming to visit New Orleans? Probably not. But, if they are concerned about the history and the cemeteries and, what's going on in that realm, I can't imagine there wouldn't be concern and some opinion on what's going on.
Let's delve into the current issues in the cemeteries in New Orleans. Jane Batty, Metairie Cemetery, Oddfellows Rest, Greenwood Cemetery, and many more. Give us, if you could, an update on those issues.
Well, those three cemeteries are usually open to the public, if not totally open. You can access them by appointment. They're beautiful, acres and acres, hundreds of acres of the most exquisite artwork in the funerary world. And so fortunately they're open all the time. The problem is the Catholic Archdiocese cemeteries, you have to have a tour in order to access the cemetery. And so it makes it difficult. I know you can get in if you have a tomb and you need to do maintenance, but I get complaints about it quite often that they cannot get in to repair a tomb or check on it. So there are some issues, but for the most part, you can access all the other cemeteries that are available to the public on a daily basis.
Now, what about cemetery art theft? What is going on with that?
Well, there is vandalism, but nobody can prove who is causing it. The cemetery art theft case was over many years ago, and it was never concluded. Nobody ever knew where the artwork went. And so that's always a concern, and graves do get vandalized. But
and Jeff and Jamie, may I inject?
Yeah, jump in, please, Shannon.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, from a historian perspective, unfortunately, graves and grave robbing have always gone hand in hand, including cemeteries in Savannah suffering art theft. So, not to excuse it, obviously, it's a heinous crime. Sometimes it's been an economic hardship hour where people turn to the cemetery strangely for material goods or whatever. I mean, again, it's, never justified in the basic or even ideal sense. But, again, this is just, I hate to say it, part and parcel to the history of cemeteries worldwide. And, where there are problems and there's goodness, there should be, solutions and people working together.
So, Shannon, as you look at what we're dealing with here in New Orleans and you look at sort of the current condition of our tourism industry and what influences are going on from the City Hall and other influences, how would you rate our industry compared to what's going on in Savannah and other cities?
Well, I absolutely, on a personal level, I would say that hospitality really flows through the veins of people in the city of New Orleans. So it's always such a joy to go there and interact. I know that socially, both Savannah and New Orleans have problems with crime, and honestly have, just found that New Orleans feels a little more lawless these days and in ways broken. And I think a part of the broken conversation is some of the cemetery aspect. But in general, I much admire the flavor of New Orleans and every bit of what attracts people there. And cemeteries are those great outdoor art museums and great classrooms. And that's all very healthy and uplifting, I mean, in the general notion.
And I'd love to get your view as well, Mindy, because you're so connected also with what is going on in Savannah, and there are a lot of similarities between Savannah and New Orleans, correct?
Yes, there are, and we kind of consider Savannah sort of the smaller sister of New Orleans in a lot of ways. And as Shannon alluded, we are dealing with our own issues here. We also have a rise in crime. We have a rise in homelessness and kind of the problems that's causing for our tourists who are walking through our squares or parks and seeing homeless all around. So we are dealing with a lot of the same issues that the larger cities and New Orleans in particular is dealing with, and having those same struggles. So we can certainly relate to what you guys are going through.
Jane, talk to us, if you could, about the need for a good shepherd for the cemeteries in New Orleans. Tell us more.
Well, there are all these regulatory commissions, all these boards, but they don't seem to have a concept that cemeteries are sacred ground. They operate it with a concept that a cemetery is a problem to me because I have to manage it. But cemeteries are the largest bodies of information per square foot of anything that's in the world. Cemeteries have the largest amounts of information. And so they need to be protected by someone who only wants goodwill, and for the cemeteries to be kept up and protected, and so that we don't have to go through all these regulatory lawsuits.
And who would create something like that, Jane?
We've been tossing this around, talking about this between tour guides and tour guide companies, and it's a big question. Who steps in and says, "Okay, we feel more about the cemeteries than other regulatory boards"? So it's a big question, and we haven't come up with an answer yet, but we're working on it. And it's a huge.
Yeah. Let me give Shannon a quick response. We just got about 30 seconds. Go ahead, Shannon.
No problem. Well, in Savannah, we also saw an era, what I call between like the gold dollar era and the funny money stuff, where the cemetery goes into collapse and there's a handover to the government for sort of a rescue minute. However, I don't know if, government can do a successful job considering the challenges of cemeteries to make them really work. So, I don't think government is necessarily the overall answer long term.
To be continued, folks. I'd love to do this again with you. Thank all of you for joining us. And our friend Brian is going to put all of your contact information on our podcast page. Thanks to all of you for being with us. Thanks to everyone who joined us during the week. Have a great Labor Day holiday. We'll be back with you on Tuesday. Best of Brug on Monday. Real Talk with Revolution is next.